During consolidation process, the survivorship rules will be applied, which will ultimately determine which cell data will survive in the golden copy of the record and which cell data will be discarded or will be maintained in the excerpt table. For this, MDM Hub considers the surviving cell data or the winner cell data to represent the better version of the truth among the other cell data values. Ultimately, a single or consolidated record will be created and will be maintained in the base object table. These survivorship rules are applied not only just for the trust enabled column but also for non-trust enabled column as well. When MDM Hub compares the cell data between two records, it determines survivorship based on the four important rules. And those rules are: the first rule is trust score, second is source last update date, third is ROID object, and the fourth and last one is a ROID xrep. What is this trust score? As we have seen in our earlier lecture, we configure the trust based on the source system for each individual cell. The trust score only applies if a column is trust enabled. If there is no trust enabled column, then the next rules will be applied, and that is nothing but source last update date. By using source last update date, which is present in the xrep table, the data with the more recent cross-reference source last update date will survive. If the source last update value is equal, then MDM Hub applies the next rule, that is the ROID object rule. The next rule is based on the ROID object. This ROID object contains the numeric value. The data with the highest ROID object value gets survived. If the ROID object values are equal, then MDM Hub processes the next rule, and that is nothing but the ROID xrep. By using ROID xrep in the xrep table, value of the ROID xrep which contains greater than other record, such record will get survived. In normal scenario, we do not normally reach out to the ROID xrep. The first three cases like trust score, source last update date, and ROID object itself determine the surviving cell data. Let's have an example about this trust rule. Let's have a look on the rule number 1, that is trust score. In this screen, we can see there are two records, one from the marketing department and the second from the sales department. This record contains several attributes such as first name, last name, age, gender, account ID, and city. Out of these all attributes, last name and account ID, these are the trust enable column. Hence, the trust rule will be applied. For the marketing department, we have the trust score as 80% on last name as well as 80% on account ID. For the sales source, we have the 70% for both last name and account ID. As we see, the marketing department has highest trust, then last name and account ID from the marketing department will survive in the golden copy of the record. Let's consider second scenario, that is based on the last update date survivorship. As we have seen our earlier rule, the last name and account ID will be survived from the marketing because it has the highest trust. Now, to demonstrate last update date scenario, we have to consider record 4, record 3, and record 2. The last update date of record 2 and 3 is less than last update date of record 4. Hence, the record which has values such as first name, age, these will survive from the ERP system, that is record 4. The other attribute like gender and city will not be used because null value will not survive over not null value. Hence, the last update date rule for the record 4 will be applied for first name and age attribute because it contains value and it can compare with the other records. First name John from the ERP system, that is record 4 will survive, and age 48 will survive again from the record 4 because it has the highest last update date compared to record 2, 3 as well as 1. As we have seen in our earlier rules, rule 1 and rule 2, the record with attribute first name, last name, age and account ID are already survived with the trust score and last update date rules respectively. Now the remaining attribute, that is gender and city, how they are going to survive. As record 1, 2 and 3 contains these values, hence the comparison will happen among these records. The very first rule will be considered whether the trust is configured. As for gender and city there is no trust is configured, so trust rule will not be applied. Now about the last update date. This record has last update date, but the first record has the lower last update date compared to second and third. Hence, the first record will be skipped from survivorship. Now record 2 and 3 has the same last update date. So which record going to win? In that case, the row ID object will be compared. As record 2 has a lower row ID object than the record 3, hence record 3 will survive. So value M for gender will survive from record 3, and the same rule will be applied for the city name, that is New York City will be survived as a city name. Now the final rule is the row ID XREF. So if the still row ID object is the same for the similar record, then the final rule row ID XREF will be applied. And this way golden copy of the record will be created by using these 4 rules.